Alright, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. His Excellency Mr. Dedi Sharif Usman, the Secretary of the Directorate General of State Assets Management or DGSAM, Ministry of Finance. His Excellency Mr. Arik Haryono, the Director of Valuation, DGSAM, Ministry of Finance. The Honorable, the Directors of the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, and the Statistics Indonesia or PPS. The Honorable, all the heads of regional office and the officials of DGSAM, Ministry of Finance. His Excellency Mr. David Kachan, the Senior Economist of the World Bank. The Honorable, our speakers today, Prof. Lars Hein and Dr. Arita Suwarno, and also our moderator, Mr. Darmawan Dwi Atmoko. The Honorable, all of the functional officials, and the Honorable, the academics and university students, and to all the participants of this webinar. We would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for taking the time to attend this international webinar, Realizing the Value of Nature Carbon Sequestration Valuation, on today, Thursday, March 28, 2024. My name is Royani from the Ministry of Finance, and I am delighted to be your host for this event. And I will be hosting this webinar for about the next 1.5 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, today's event is the third webinar of the Valuation School 2.0 series, and it is a collaboration between the Ministry of Finance, the World Bank, and the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Joining us today, the exciting panel of speakers lined up for you who are experts in their respective fields, and they will deliver the concept of carbon sequestration valuation. And we hope that you will find their presentations and discussions informative and engaging. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar is not only attended by the participants from the Ministry of Finance, but also participants from the World Bank, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, the Statistics Indonesia, the academics and students of some universities in Indonesia. And for your information, at the end of the webinar, there will be a keyword, and please write the keyword in the evaluation form to get a certificate from this webinar. And once again, we will inform you of the keyword at the end of the webinar. So we hope that you'll be actively listening to this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to start this session by inviting everyone to bow our head for a moment for our opening prayer. Please let the prayer begin. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to invite Mr. Arik Haryono, the Director of Valuation DGSEM, Ministry of Finance, to deliver his opening speech. For His Excellency, Mr. Arik Haryono, time is yours. Excuse me, Mr. Arik Haryono, you are still on mute.
Oke, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, greeting of excellence, and may peace be with every one of us. Dear distinguished guests and colleagues, first and foremost, I would like to express my sincere gratitude. I am delighted to welcome you to the webinar, which promised to be an engaging discussion on realizing the value of nature carbon sequestration valuation. Our forests, oceans, and wetlands do more than beautify our planet. They serve as a vital logs in the global carbon cycles, offering a natural solution to the pressing value issue of climate change. Yet the valuations of such as a crucial service has often lingered in the shadow of our economic discussion. It's time to shift this narrative and bring the economic value of carbon sequestration to the forefront, integrating into our financial system and policy frameworks. Today's webinar is designed to broaden our collective and understanding of carbon sequestration valuation by weaving through expert case study that highlight its diverse application and impacts. This narrative, based on the experience of pioneers in the field, will not only demonstrate the transformative power of valuation in environmental conservation, but will also highlight its critical role in shaping sustainable policy and practices. We are here to delve into the methodologies behind carbon sequestration valuation with the goal of understanding the process and emphasizing the important in policy making and also sustainable development. Through this journey, we hope to provide you with insights that will help you better understand and apply this principle, fostering a deeper appreciation for the complex relationship between our economy and also the environment. I am thrilled to guide you through this journey and the intersection of environmental conservation and economic valuation. Understanding and quantifying the value of carbon sequestration is not only critical in a world dealing with climate change, but also necessary for our shared future. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Lars Heinz, professor from Wageningen University, and also Dr. Arita Suwarno, researcher and lecturer, Wageningen University, whose expertise and dedication to this cause have made this webinar possible. Their willingness to share knowledge and insight in invaluable, and I thank them for their contribution to today's discussion. Finally, let us remember that valuing carbon sequestration goes beyond mere economics. It is a commitment to presence and preserving our planet for future generations. It is a mission that calls for the collective action of government, business, and also individual alike. Thank you for joining us on this vital mission. Together, let's embark on this journey toward realizing the true value of nature, guided by insight and discussion that will unfold today. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency Mr. Arik Haryono, for the speech. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, please note that the certificate will be given to the participants who submit the evaluation form with the correct keyword, and the keyword will be informed at the end of the discussion. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this webinar from the beginning until the end. So we have got an exciting lineup of speakers for you today that will deliver a very interesting and informative presentation. This webinar will be led by an incredible moderator, His Excellency Mr. Darmawan Dwi Atmoko. Mr. Darmawan, he is currently served as a section head of standardization of business valuation 3 at DGSAM, the Ministry of Finance, and he has completed his master's degree of property studies at University of Queensland, Australia, and he has completed his PhD property economics at Queensland University of Technology, Australia. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Darmawan Dwi Atmoko.
Thank you, Mbak Royani. Thank you very much. It's my honorable to be here and it's part of this very hot topic discussion. And it's very update topic discussion here about what we call it, valuation of carbon sequestration. Uh, good afternoon and good for everyone or participant of this seminar, and also good morning, Prof. Lars and Dr. Arita. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Uh, we we are hearing, or we know about global warming. We understand or frequently heard about carbon emissions, and also it is not that far for us when discussing about carbon capture or carbon sequestration. But what is actually interlinked between them and what Indonesia has and related to the issue and how this kind of issue or will be impact to Indonesia and how Indonesia can contribute significantly to reduce global emission. With us, no, we have Prof. Lars and Dr. Arita from Wageningen University, the Netherlands. Welcome, Prof. Lars and Dr. Arita. How are you, Prof?
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm
Dr.
very
Arita,
well. Thank
yeah,
you.
nice to see you. It's still morning there, yeah? It's a bit early morning there in the Netherlands. Prof. Lars is a natural resource management specialist in IVAD and also a professor in Wageningen University. And Dr. Arita, also researcher at Wageningen University and research, and also she is a senior global specialist natural resource management. And both of the speakers will talk and deeply discuss about what impact of carbon sequestration, the carbon emission, the maybe it's about in economic of Indonesia, the impact to Indonesia itself, and many of discussion will be go for the next two sessions in this webinar. So this webinar will be in two sections. The first section, Prof. Las will presenting the presentation from Lars. Then the second one, Dr. Arita will presenting the topic from the Dr. Arita. And before we start from the first session, I might start with the poll. Yeah, so we start with the first section from Prof. Lars, and before we start with the first section from Prof. Lars, we start with the poll. Yeah, so everyone, all participants here in the webinar, yeah, could you please bring the poll? So what do you perceive as the biggest challenge to Indonesia carbon credit mechanism? Apa yang Anda anggap sebagai tantangan terbesar bagi mekanisme kredit karbon Indonesia? Di situ ada regulatory constraints, ada pembatasan regulasi, market volatility, legal framework for collaboration, validation and verification. Ya, ya ini pertanyaan preference ya, tidak ada benar salah. Silakan, baik. Kita tunggu sampai detik ya, stop. Ya. Oke, sudah 157 partisipan, 53% sudah ya, sudah mulai slow down. Kita bisa stop dan kita lihat hasil poolnya ya 25 ya. So 25% Bapak Ibu memilih bahwa regulatory constraints menjadi isu. Kemudian ini the big one is 37% legal framework for collaboration ya. kemudian the second one validation and verification. Nah, kita akan bahas, we will discuss this issue deeply with Prof. Large in the first section of this webinar. Then the next one, we will also discuss this for the next session. So, Prof. Large, this is your turn to start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dwi Altimo. So thank you very much for inviting me. Right, it's really a pleasure to be in contact again with all the Indonesian colleagues and friends. Thank you to the Indonesian government for allowing me to speak here. Thank you to the World Bank for inviting me, and thank you also to senior management of IFAD to allow me to speak today. I will share my screen, and I have a short presentation on carbon markets, carbon accounting, and how they could reinforce each other. I'm quite sure you can now see my screen, so unless you hear something else, I will just start presenting now. So the idea is to inform you a little bit of new developments on ecosystem accounting. And so SEA stands for System of Environmental Economic Accounting. I'm going to talk about that. How carbon is dealt with in the SEA accounts. Talk a bit about the voluntary carbon market. And then there's also quite some attention for Indonesian peatlands, because I think peatlands is a very interesting ecosystem where some of the challenges related to natural capital accounting to carbon, where they coincide, and where also both carbon markets and natural capital accounting can make a real contribution to better management of the system. So I will start first with showing a few slides on ecosystem accounting, and those.
Excuse me, Prof. Large, could you please show the presentation in bilingual?
I only have the English version here, I think.
Okay.
Can I continue, or should we organize things differently?
Yeah, you just can continue.
I'm sorry about that. I'll try to explain slowly so there's enough time for the translation also.
If I may, could you hold on 1 minute?
Of course.
We can present the bilingual slides at this end, and then if you just say next slide, we'll move along each time.
Perfect.
So we'll just pull those up now.
Yeah.
So just let me know when I can start again.
Yeah. Could you stop to share the screen for now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll share the screen from here. And this. Can you see the screen here?
Yes, Mbak Laris.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So let's move to the next slide then.
Can you see is the slide moving on your end?
Yeah, this is fine. Yeah. Yeah. But I want. Is that now the right one? Yeah. Okay, fine, great. So then I'll just resume if that's okay. Right. So just to go back a little bit in time, right? We all know that it's important to measure how the economy performs to inform policy making, and we do that with the national accounts. So the national accounts are produced in every country to produce economic statistics such as gross domestic product. And in Indonesia, of course, it is BPS that is responsible for these statistics, and I'm very glad also that BPS colleagues are present today. I've worked with the BPS colleagues for many years also in the past. And the idea is, and the point now is that the national accounts do not properly measure natural resources, and especially not the degradation of natural resources. So if there's ecosystem degradation, it is not well accounted for in the national accounts. And this has been recognized for a long time. And that is why over time there wasn't the objective was to develop a complementary system to the national accounts to allow measuring natural capital uses, natural capital degradation, or also natural capital restoration, of course. So let's move to the next slide. So this is how, with a group of people in the United Nations, we came about to develop the SEA, the System of Environmental Economic Accounting, and it consists of two parts. The first part is the central framework, which has been used since 1994 already. So it has a long history, and it also has a long history in Indonesia, because if I remember correctly, the Indonesian version of the central framework, which is called SISNALing, has been in operation since the end of the 1990s. So Indonesia is actually one of the first countries globally to fully implement that system. Now, the SISNALing system, the central framework, is very useful because it allows you to record the non-renewable natural resources, plus many other things, but we talked today about natural resources. And so the nickel reserves of Indonesia, you can very well measure and account for with the SISNALing. But SISNALing does not include, the central framework by design does not include the ecosystems, the forests, the water, fish. Yeah, there's some fish resources in there actually, but many of the ecosystem resources are not part of the central framework. And this is why we developed over time the ecosystem accounting approach. And this has been quite a process starting in about 2010 up till now. And in 2021, the United Nations Statistical Commission declared that this ecosystem accounting, at least the biophysical part of it, was fit to be a statistical standard, which means that all countries in the world have accepted the SEA as a system that you can use to measure natural resources and also how natural resources contribute to the economy. And over time, more and more countries are using the ecosystem accounting methodology. And the map that you see there is already a little bit old. And so it's 2 years old, and that is old in the field that we are working in. So now already many more countries have joined. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so what can you do now with ecosystem accounting? Well, the interesting thing is that ecosystem accounting allows you to understand how your ecosystem is supporting economic activity. So how your forestry sector depends upon the forests, how your fishery sectors depends upon fish resources, how maybe you have flood control from forests, how you have also carbon sequestration. That is a little bit too fast. Yeah. So and the interesting thing is that ecosystem accounting is a spatial system. So you're using maps to measure and to understand your natural resources. And that means that you have many more possibilities also to use that information to support environmental management. Now we can go to the next slide. So, and this is a slide I've presented to, and I've got the idea that some of the people in the room also will have seen this slide before, but it's still good to show in this one slide the overview of the whole SEA ecosystem accounting system. So you have an extent account, which is measuring the type and the area of ecosystems that you have in a country. So how many forests you have and how many plantation forests and how many paddy fields. You have then second, the condition account that allows you to understand the health or the condition of the ecosystems. Maybe what's the standing biomass in the forest. And you have then the ecosystem services account. So ecosystem services are a central concept because they allow you connecting the ecosystem to the economy. And the ecosystem services you can analyze in both physical and also in monetary terms. And so the amount of money that you generate with a certain ecosystem. And then you have an asset account. So you're really your natural capital assets, which is covered in your monetary ecosystem asset account. And as mentioned, you have maps and you have tables. And those are the core accounts. We also have thematic accounts. And in the last version of the SEA, the 4 thematic accounts are oceans. And I think Indonesia is also, actually I know Indonesia is already experimenting and testing that approach as well with ocean accounting. There's urban ecosystem accounts. There's also the carbon account, which is what we're going to talk about today. And there's also a biodiversity account that all give complementary information to the core accounts. can go to the next slide. So this is an example from my own country, right, the Netherlands, because we share many things with Indonesia, not only history, but we also share a lot of the situation that we have a lot of peat in our country. And interestingly, the Netherlands and Indonesia have about the same percentage of peatlands, about 8% of our country, just as in Indonesia, is peat. Of course, our country is much, much smaller, so the challenge, well, but the challenges are actually also very big that we have with peat. And this is also covered now in our ecosystem account. So the ecosystem account that we have at the moment in the Netherlands is already quite elaborate. We've got it annually from 2015 onwards with 15 ecosystem services, but we have a lot of data in our country. But this is just an example, and you see the carbon sequestration. So blue has the highest values, and those are the forests. And then on the right-hand side, you see the emissions, and you see that, yeah, the peat in our country also is a problem because much of the peat is drained. It's used for agriculture. We are really trying to restore it, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And you see still that the emissions from the peatlands are quite high in the Netherlands. And so actually there's twice as much emissions from peatland as there is sequestration in the forest in our country. So we can go to the next slide. This is
Yes, Prof. Lats. Bapak Ibu, ini ada poll yang kedua di tengah ya. Nanti kita akan ada beberapa poll di depan tadi, tengah, kemudian di akhir. Di poll ini ditanyakan, ya, measuring carbon, what are the main difference between SEA and national GHG inventories, LULUCF reporting. Ya, apa perbedaan antara SEA dan LULUCF ya, System of Environmental and Economic Accounting, and LULUCF is I think land use change
and
of forestry ya.
Yeah, and deforestation.
Ya. Oke. Silakan Bapak Ibu. Wow, ini cepat. Ya, masih terus ya, 60 partisipan berpartisipasi. Kita lanjut. Tadi 56% sekitar ya, kita tunggu sampai sekitar 50%. Coba kita cepat seberapa pilihannya. Di pertanyaan ini.
Not an easy question though.
Iya. Okay, I think it's enough. The committee, I think it's enough. Yeah. Yeah, it's 40% SEA reports of carbon and LULUCF reports change and the land use on the forestry. Yeah. Okay, please, Prof. Lars, we can discuss this.
Yes. Let us discuss it.
Presentation, yeah.
It's an important point, actually. No, let's go back if you don't mind. Oh no, is it the same here? Because yeah. Okay, this is. Sorry, I don't know what you did to the presentation.
Yeah, this is the next presentation.
It's very good. It makes a big improvement to my idea. So yes, it wasn't actually an important question in the poll because now some of you may have wondered. Look, we already have LULUCF reporting. We have national greenhouse gas inventories that we report to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, right? And every country is doing that, right, under the Paris Agreement, and then we also have carbon accounting in the SEA. So why do we need two systems, and what is then the difference, or are they the same systems? And that is a question which is a really important one, because I was talking about carbon, but of course carbon is already in the LULUCF reporting of the national greenhouse gas inventories. And so I was involved in that discussion quite a lot in Europe, and the idea is that we should really align the reports, right? That as much as possible we use the same data, the same numbers to feed in the carbon account and also the LULUCF reporting. And why is it then still useful to have a carbon account? Well, first of all, because you can then integrate your carbon in your other ecosystem accounts, right? So you understand that, if you have all ecosystem services but not carbon in your ecosystem account, the system would not be complete, would not be so useful. So you needed to have a good overview of the economic value, the monetary value of your natural resources. That's the first reason. And the second reason is that, there is also some complementary information in the carbon accounts compared to the LULUCF. And the differences are that, first of all, and it's the question, that was the question, right? So the SIA carbon account, you have the stock, you report stocks of carbon until a certain soil depth. LULUCF reports changes in stocks, so that's different. And also, LULUCF is focusing on managed ecosystems, right? So it's not covering natural or unmanaged ecosystems, but in SIA you cover all ecosystems. So there's a few differences here, and in that sense, the information that you get from the carbon account is complementary to the information in the national greenhouse gas inventories. But the idea is that you use the same data sources, right, to feed into both accounting efforts, so it would not be double work. I think I will leave it here. There's more that can be said about it, but it's maybe enough. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So maybe to update you, and this is all very recent information. I'm quite sure that you haven't seen it before, because not so many people have seen it before, but these are the new documents that came out from the European Commission, and they're all public, right? So it's publicly available if you know where to look. So the idea is that the European Union, so not only the Netherlands, right, but the European Union will is preparing legislation at the moment to make ecosystem accounting, or a subset of the ecosystem accounts, compulsory, mandatory. So that means that all the countries in the EU, the 27 member states, minus the three smallest ones actually, will have to compile ecosystem accounts in the future. As of 2026 will be the first reporting year. And those accounts will have to be produced in 2027. So it's quite soon. And that includes also carbon sequestration. And that is nice, right, this process, because it's a legal obligation for member states to engage in carbon accounting. It also means that it has to be made very specific what you have to do, right? If you have a law, you have to define very specifically what countries have to report and how they have to do that and which indicators they have to use. And that means there has been a process in the EU, which is still going on. It has been going on for 3 years to find out how best to report carbon in the carbon accounts in the context of the SIA. And this table is from that latest version of the report, which is only 2 weeks old. So you can see here that the idea is that the EU countries would be requested to report 3 indicators. And the first one is what's called now primary carbon sequestration. So there's been a whole discussion also on the terminology. And so the primary carbon sequestration is really the capturing of carbon in the ecosystem. So that means that you do not include here, for example, emissions from the peat or emissions from forest fire. This is really the positive contribution of ecosystems. That's the first one, primary carbon sequestration. So it's always positive. So it's also an ecosystem service in the sense of the SIA. Then there's a number of indicators that are needed in order to come up with the other indicators, but that would not be compulsory for reporting in itself. There's carbon emissions due to various sources, due to land use change, due to disturbance, such as wildfires, controlled burning, erosion. Part of it can be due to peat oxidation. So the EU countries will have to report on this as well, right? So that is good, because so far there's not all the European countries have full information on this peat oxidation. So they will have to start doing that in order to come up with the final 2 indicators. And those are net carbon sequestration. So that is different from primary carbon sequestration. So net carbon sequestration is the primary carbon sequestration minus the carbon emissions due to land use change, disturbances, and wood harvest. So that's really what is happening in the ecosystem. So this number can be negative. And in the Netherlands, for example, it will be negative. And then we have also the final indicator, which is carbon retention, and that's corresponding to the stock. And the idea now is to report the stock in the first 1 meter of the soil, right? So if you look at peat, you report here stocks the first 1 meter of carbon, because the peat layers can be 14 meters deep, and it's going to be too complicated and also not useful to go deeper. So this is the idea, this was a process of more than 3 years to come up with this. So it seems simple, but it is not if you want to get alignment between all the countries and look at the data availability. So this is the system which is most likely to be adopted now by the European Union to report on carbon. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to go back a little bit in time, because in 2015, and I'm sure some of you will remember, the World Bank had the WAVES project in Indonesia. And as part of that WAVES project, we prepared some, and I was involved as advisor to that project a long time ago. And then we prepared a peat account for Indonesia. And that was published by BPS, right, together with the World Bank, I think in 2015. So it is quite interesting to see that this has also been tried already in Indonesia. And I thought I would show you that example because you can see in the map, you can see the ecosystem extent account for the peatlands of Kalimantan, of course. And it's like an animation, so you see changes over time there, but only up to 2015 because it's quite old already. You see the fires, I think. The fires is in the columns in the graph. And on the right-hand side, you see the water level. But this is now very old, right? More than 10 years old. And of course, now the Indonesian government also has much better data compared to the situation in 2015. And also there's more data from satellites available compared to the old days. So it's actually possible to prepare those peat accounts also, or these ecosystem accounts for Indonesia. And they will be, if you would do that now, be much better than in 2015. So next slide, please. Then just an example of a policy application, right? Because maybe you think, oh, what can you now do when you have these carbon accounts or these ecosystem accounts? And this is then an example that focuses on peat. Again, all the colored areas are the peatlands of the Netherlands, and you can zoom in. So you can even see the drainage level and the peat emissions by individual farmers' fields. And then you can do some interesting calculations. And that's also nice with the accounts, right? Because you can compare cost and benefits from land use options, etc. And in this case, the accounts indicate, and that was quite a surprise to everybody, that if you have deep drained peat, and in the Netherlands that means about 1 meter, that you have an emission of carbon emission of about 10 to 12 tons. So it means a CO2 emissions of about 45 ton of CO2 per hectare per year. And that means that 1 hectare of peat used for farming, deep drainage, emits the same amount of CO2 as 7 Dutch households, right? So that 1 hectare of farmer field where you see a few cows is emitting as much as 7 households, so maybe 25 people. And that puts things a little bit in perspective, right? It makes it clear how important those emissions are. And at the same time, we use then the peat accounts to do some policy analysis, say, look, if we drain less everywhere, okay, that means you really reduce your CO2 emissions a lot, and you can calculate that, you can model that. You can also compare the cost and the benefits, because if you put a CO2 price on the peat, on the CO2 emissions, then you will see that actually, in the case of the Netherlands, the cost of the CO2 emissions are almost the same as the profits for the farmer. So it is really, in the Netherlands, you really should not do any farming in the peat, but also for economic reasons. But of course, there's also a cultural aspect here. When you think of the Netherlands, everybody thinks of the cows and the fields and the grass and the cheese. Yeah, so it's difficult to change things. But over time, you can see already changes are happening. And peat is being restored, peat is being re-wetted also in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. So now a little bit about, we talked about carbon markets, not yet so much, that's the next slide, but also natural capital accounts. And the first thing I wanted to say is that, the two separate things, right? You can have carbon markets without natural capital accounts, without carbon accounts, and you can have natural capital accounts without having carbon markets. They're two separate things. It's just that, at some point, they can support each other. Because the natural capital accounts, if you have carbon data there, they can give you some information on things like leakage of carbon systems, or you can use them to monitor how your carbon markets are maybe reducing overall emissions in the country. So that you don't have to have both of them, you don't need them for each other, but they are complementary. And then, and there's the other thing, which is that the some people say, look, we leave everything to the market, right? We have carbon markets and then everything is going to be fine. But this is, of course, not the case, right? Because the markets themselves are not able to regulate peatlands, right, in an economic efficient way. Because peatlands, as we all know, right, are hydrological units. In Indonesia especially, they can be very large, hundreds of kilometers of peat domes. And if you drain a part of the peat dome, then other part of the peat dome will also be drained. But it means you really have to look at them from an integrated perspective. And if you leave them to all individual companies or individual smallholders managing their own plot, yeah, it's not going to be economically efficient. It's not going to be optimal from the perspective of society. So you really need to have government interventions. And the second reason for thinking about government control in this case is externalities. And this is really basic textbook economics. So when you have high externalities, as is the case of peatlands, I'll show in my next slides, then you really need government intervention to organize that. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. I'm taking too much time also. So just to show these externalities, right? This is the soil subsidence in the peatlands of Sumatra, because Sumatra, there was a lot of detailed elevation data available from Deltares projects in the past. And that could be used to model the soil subsidence. It's relevant, right? Because it means that, yeah, the productive capacity of your land is, when you talk about peatlands, because we're focusing a bit on the peatlands now, it's really going to decrease over time, right? So your asset basis, the value of your natural capital, is not as high as you think, because in the future you cannot use your land anymore in this case, because if you drain peatlands, for example, for oil palm or for other uses, right, then over time you get more flooding, your land will subside, and your land base, your asset base will be lost, right? So it has economic consequences over the long term. Now you can model that, you can map that, which we have done, and you can say, look, for the coming 10, 20 years, it's not a big problem in most of the peatlands, but after that, it's going to be a serious issue. So actually the value of your natural capital is being reduced because you're degrading your natural resource base. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. Now I talked about externalities, right? Externalities are not in natural capital account, not in the SIA, but in the central framework, sorry, not in the ecosystem accounts, but in the central framework, you can have emissions. Maybe you do not usually monetize those, but your emissions from fire and from peat oxidation, they would show up in your signaling account, in your central framework account. And then you can see that, of course, if you model that, you can also assess the impacts of those fires and these emissions. And then you can see that peat fires in Indonesia have actually significant health impacts because of the air pollution, in terms of mortality of children or of adults, respiratory diseases, and also work absenteeism. So actually, again, this is a connection where you show how ecosystem management is feeding back to economic activities, and in this case, also reducing economic activity and having an economic cost.
Excuse me, Prof. Lach. We have approximately 5 minutes more.
Yeah, it's that,
Just
right?
make sure that just make sure that we have
speed up a little bit. That's going to be it's not my strong point to keep to the time schedule. Okay, let's move on, please. I'll do my best. So there's a few slides left. So the carbon market, I was also asked to talk about that, and I don't have much time to talk about valuation, right? But the one thing I can say is that natural capital accounting has a very specific way of valuing ecosystems, which is not the same as you would use in a welfare-based cost-benefit analysis. So you really want to be very sure of the methods, the economic valuation methods that you apply in natural capital accounting. Then let's have a little bit of a talk about the voluntary carbon market. You see here that the carbon market has really been taking off in the last 2 years, because until 2020, I think the demand was quite limited globally. But now, especially from companies, there's so much interest in carbon offsets that the demand for carbon credits is really increasing, and also the price has been increasing. I understand now that the price you get for carbon in the international market is easily 25 to 30 for agroforestry projects, for example, $25 to $30 per ton CO2. So, and that is you need only to invest $1 or $2 in Indonesia to get that amount of carbon reduction. So there is a massive potential for economic gains here in the country. Let's move to the next slide, and then I think we can skip a few slides. We skip this one because I've been talking too much. We skip this one. And I had a few slides on how to better manage peat, right? And I just show one of these. This is the sago system. Sago, of course, is an indigenous crop to Indonesia, and it has been used for many centuries already as a food crop. The nice thing of sago is that you can grow it in peat without drainage, and it's also a very productive crop that fetches a very good price. So sago is one of the potential responses that could be considered by the Indonesian government to move a little bit away from the drainage-based agricultural systems in peatlands, only peatlands, right? Not mineral soils I'm talking about, but only the peatlands, and move there to a system which requires no drainage or much less drainage. And in that sense, it would be very positive for your NDCs, right? For your greenhouse gas balance. You would also be able to show that with a carbon account. And also, I think the carbon market itself has the potential to provide some funding for this, because my feeling is that if you rewet peatlands, but you do not think of the economic uses of the peatlands after they have been rewetted, it's going to be very expensive for the government, but it's not going to yield too many benefits. So it's better to think a bit more long term and say, okay, if we rewet, we also need productive land use, and that could very well be the sago, because there's a big, very big market for it. Sago is a starch crop, so you have the whole world to sell the starch to. It's a gluten-free product. It's cheap to harvest. It's a crop that is potentially suitable for smallholders, also maybe even for plantation companies. And I know that there have been some mixed experiences with sago in the past. But the good thing is, I think if you use money from the carbon market to and kind of start up that investment in the sago and to cover the first years that you don't have production, I think that would be a very good option to better manage those peatlands. And I wish we had such a good option in the Netherlands to better have profitable land use for our peatlands. So maybe we move to the next slide. There's a few other, let's move, skip this one, skip this one too, skip this one too. So then a few concluding slides. So natural capital accounting is something which is quite useful for policy making, right? So it has a lot of baseline data for policy formulation. You can use it also to monitor what's happening to the ecosystems, to understand how ecosystems contribute to the economy. And in Indonesia, even I think there have been some discussions in the past on fiscal transfers to districts or provinces that achieve successes, for example, in better managing peatlands, because maybe that comes at a cost for the local government, but at the same time it comes at a benefit for the society as a whole. Because, for example, you have lower fires, so lower health impacts from fires. And yeah, that means that it would be kind of fair to say, look, if you're a district or a province that really managing the peat well and is reforesting or rewetting, that could be considered in the whole process of fiscal transfers. So again, that, of course, if you have a fiscal transfer, it needs to be supported by some objective measurement, right? Otherwise, governments, local governments will say, why does this local government get something and this other government get more? And then you say, look, but wait, we are measuring that with the SIA, which is a United Nations standard. So it is an international standard. We're following the standard, and the standard is now the basis, an objective basis for such transfers. I think there is some potential also there to use this for policy support in Indonesia. Next slide, please, if there's more slides. Yeah, so I mentioned this already, right, that I think there's complementarity. The carbon market can be used if kind of Indonesia decides to open up and also allow the sale of carbon credits abroad, because now the price for the national market in Indonesia is quite low, but the price in the international market for carbon is much higher. So it would be able to generate a lot of income for Indonesia to also contribute to rewetting the peatlands. And if that then could be used in such a way that you generate also sustainable local income for local people, for example, with sago or these other options that I didn't have time to present, then I think you kind of have all the pieces of the puzzle. You've got funding externally, you've got the technical means to do this, you've got a system to measure it, and you've got the local benefits also in the long term. And I think the amount of money that is available at the moment for projects is for red projects or carbon projects or agroforestry project is really very big, right? It's at least hundreds of millions of dollars that would be could be made available. So next slide, please. Yeah, that's it. So sorry for taking a little bit more time. I hope it wasn't too bad. But yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Larch. Yeah, it's very brief, but still very comprehensive there. The presentation from Prof. Larch. And in this session, before we go to the question and answer session, we have two polls question. Teman-teman boleh ditunjukin untuk pollsnya yang yes, ini yang pertama ya, yang terakhir. Dua dari yang pertama dari dua yang terakhir. How can natural capital accounting support policy formulation and implementation? Bagaimana akuntansi modal alam dapat mendukung formulasi dan implementasi kebijakan. Jadi the link between capital accounting and the policy formulation ya. Jadi di poll ini juga bisa dilihat ya di poll ini. Kayaknya baik semua ini. 1, 2, 3, 4 ya. Provide the baseline data for policy formulation. I think so. Monitor success of policy implementations. Demonstrate economic benefit of policies. Support fiscal transfer to district and province. I think Prof. already mentioned about that before. For fiscal transfer. Oke. Baru 18%. Ini harus semangat ini pesertanya. Mari Bapak Ibu, ini sambil berburu takjil nih. Oke, 28%, 30. Kita tunggu sekitar 50%. Biasanya cepat. Ya, dikit lagi ke up. Nanti kita tanya Prof. Mars ini. Ya, 50% ya cukup. Dan ini sepertinya jawabannya all of the above ya. Jadi I think is all this answer are correct. I think yeah. Okay, the next polls. I think we have one more question as the last question. I think yeah. Panitia.
Izin Pak, nomor 2-nya sudah ada di bawah terisi pollingnya.
Oh
ada di
sudah
bawah.
ya. Oh, oke, ya. Oh sorry, saya yang nggak lihat. Oh iya sorry. Ya 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 ya. Oke ya. Ya ya. Oke baik. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu yang sudah mengisi polling dan I think all participants is very well known about this topic, Lars, Prof. Lars ya, from the answers and response from the polls. Yeah, now we come to the question and answer. We have simply 10 minutes for question and answer. Anyone have any issue or any concerns related to the topic before that have been presented by Prof. Large? Anyone? Ada raise hand or just open the mic, which is fine. Yeah. Anyone from the participant? Ada Bu Ria. Ya.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, minta tolong dipin Bu Rianya. Iya, silakan Bu Ria.
Hello, Lars. Nice to meet you again after Waves program. Also, 2 years ago, we met in one of the course in Wood. You were one of my lecturer, actually. So I have I have two questions. The first one is about the EU legislation on ecosystem accounting that you displayed in your presentation. I saw that some indicators, especially regarding emissions due to reasons other than energy uses, is not mandatory to calculate. I think is that because of the data limitation, or it's just because this emissions percentage or emission share is not really significant if you compare it to the energy uses generated emissions? That's the first question. And then the second question is about mangrove ecosystem. So do you so in one of the project under ocean accounts in Indonesia, in which BPS and the Ministry of Finance and also Ministry of Marine Affairs are involved, we try to build the ecosystem accounts for mangrove, and I think mangrove is the second top ecosystem that store the carbon. Do you think we can do the same? I mean, do you think we should do the same? I mean, for indicators or variables that you just display in your PIT accounts into our mangrove accounts, if I could say, or do you have suggestions on maybe particular variables that we need to include in our mangrove if we want to see the carbon accounts within our mangrove ecosystem? I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Shall I respond already, Dwi, or do you want to collect more questions, or shall I? Maybe it's easier if I respond already, or what
Yeah,
do
I
you
think this one is just a stimulation question in the middle of two sections. Then we will have Dr. Arita to respond your presentation after this.
Yeah.
Yeah, just respond the question. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
just respond the question, then we have up to Dr. Arita after the question.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you so much, right, Bu Ria, for those questions. That's really helps me also to clarify some points. So as for your first question, the emissions from energy use and all other industrial emissions, and also from households, they are measured in the air emission accounts. So they were already measured. They have been measured for many years. But the challenge is to measure the emissions from ecosystems, because it's more difficult, right, to measure emissions from ecosystems, because you need to collect data on all these different areas, and it's influenced by ecosystem management. So the answer is the emissions from energy use are for sure significant. They are in the EU larger than the emissions from the ecosystems, much larger. But they are measured and they are reported, but they are measured under a different system. They're measured under the air emission accounts, which fall under the central framework. And the ecosystem accounts is not looking at energy, because we focus on ecosystems. So there we focus on things like fires and ecosystems, or carbon sequestration and ecosystems, or emissions due to land use change. So thank you for giving me the possibility to clarify that. And then for the mangrove, I think we should have a different conversation on that to discuss that in detail. But yeah, indeed, you have to think, right, a bit to have some indicators that reflect ecosystem extent, right? So land use change in the mangrove areas, and also mangroves are an ecosystem that can, restore itself, right? It's a resilient ecosystem. So if you protect them a little bit, they will grow back. So you can look at indicators that give you information on the health, the status of the ecosystem, the biomass of the ecosystem, productivity of the ecosystem. So I would put that in a condition account. And then I would also have some ecosystem services there. So of course you would like to have a mix of extent, land use, to cover land use change and condition, and also some services. But for more detailed conversation, you can send me an email if you like, and try to answer them.
For sure. I think it would be a reunion between Puria and Prof. Lars again, and let's have more discussion. Yeah, and it was like made a question between two sections. Then Dr. Artita, you can respond the presentation from Prof. Lars, and also maybe respond also what the question from Puria Arinda. Could you please go with your presentation? Now your turn to present.
Yeah,
Thank you, Puria.
thank you, Pak Dwi. So I will try to start. My presentation is a very short presentation, and I think the assignment that gave to me is focus more on the example on the application, how we can link this account to something that is very happening right now in Indonesia, which is talking about the carbon project here and there, and also try to link, for example, the question from Ibu Ria asking about the carbon from mangrove. That's also very relevant. And in the end, all people or many stakeholders in Indonesia want to see what's the possibility to make it happen. I will start my presentation. I will try to share my screen. I hope it's not this one, but the other. Wait a second. So I hope you can see my screen now. Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's clear.
This is the one, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So first I want to focus on the peatland, but we can also talk about the carbon outside the peatland. It's just to give you some easy example, because most of the carbon is generated on the peatland. So for carbon outside the peatland, you can aim for also for the generation or credit, but usually the credit will be a little bit lower if you compare with the carbon credit from the peatland. And I think Indonesia already have a very good initiative in restoring the peatland. PRGM, for example, they already have a strategy in 3R, which is combine rewetting, revegetation, and revitalization, which is, it shows a good collaboration with community already. So it's not only talking about rewetting or revegetation done by a specific company. As you may know, that there's also a big movement for BPPH right now, which is this BPPH can also apply for carbon concession with a maximum of 50,000 hectares. I think our colleague in Ministry of Forestry and Environment, they know better about the procedure and everything. What I want to show here is that this initiative can also be seen as a starting point to enter the carbon account, and then in the end can also talking about the carbon project, both at the community level and also at the private sector. My focus here is to understand how community could enter this payment mechanism, which is we're talking about the carbon credits and also biodiversity offsets. For the company level, maybe it's a bit easier for them because they have resources and then they also have knowledge. So then what they need to do is have a look on the regulation, and then they can apply, and then they can have a look on the type of fundings and everything that they need. But for community, it's a bit different because usually community, they have a very high motivation, but they don't know what they have to do with their concession that they get. For example, we're talking about village forest. The initiative of village forest is already started in Indonesia for many years, which is a national government. They also gave a right for the village through LPHD to apply for the concession, and they can also manage this concession by themselves. And in the way to manage this concession, they can work in any ecosystem services business. So the big things that is happening right now is always talking about the carbon credit and biodiversity offset, because most of HD, if they only rely on the NTFB businesses, sometimes it's quite low. And also the market for this NTFB is also not very certain. So we also need to help them to connect with the markets. What we try to understand in terms of the community carbon is that they need investors. So that's the first thing that they need to have. And then both investor and LPHD, they can develop mutual agreements, which is not only talking about how much money that is going to invest by the investor, but it should also talking about what is the potential benefit sharing related with the money, but it's also related with the responsibility. And then another important aspect here is the policy and regulation. So the policy and regulation from the government is very important to make sure that this kind of collaboration is eligible to start the carbon project and generate the money. So without any clear policy and regulation, it's going to be a little bit difficult, especially if we look into the condition in Indonesia, where we still have to meet our NDC. So then this clarification has to be clear, start from the beginning, so then the investor, they can also see in the clear picture what they can do, what they cannot do. And then the LPHD, they can also understand what kind of responsibility they have and what kind of expectation that they can have. So there are some examples about the movement of the HD or Hutan Desa in the carbon project. I took one example from KPHL Kapuas Kahayan in the ex-Megarise project in Central Kalimantan. So in this KPHL, there's already many Hutan Desa that already established. And some of this Hutan Desa is really a potential to start carbon credit or biodiversity offset. They receive interest from many investors. It's not only domestic, but it's also international investors. Some of them, they also receive like a regular assistance from institution that is focusing in, for example, fire management or community development. And we thought that this HD, they're ready to enter the carbon credits or biodiversity offset. But the question is, who is the investor? And then when we try to connect the investor, then we came back to the question about policy and regulation, what we can do, what we cannot do. And I think for the investor, it's very essential to understand what kind of regulation and what kind of policy that they can follow. And then they can start thinking, okay, so if this is the policy, if this is the regulation, this is the business model that we're going to develop together with the community. In general, there's always opportunity and challenge. So as you may see, that the international market of the carbon is one of the opportunity. So maybe the domestic market is bit small if we compare to the international market. That's also related with the price. So the domestic price, I still need to check, but I think the latest information I got is not very clear about the domestic price, because I think it's only PLN who start buying the carbon, and the price is set up between PLN and the vendor. So it's not following like the market price. And the second opportunity here is about the investment. As I discussed before, there are so many international investors that want to put their money in any carbon project in Indonesia. It doesn't really matter if it's private investment or community investment. And there's also opportunity to increase community development, because if community, they can also involve in carbon project and in carbon credit or biodiversity offset, there's always an opportunity for them to earn more money. So then we can also help them to secure their livelihood. But in the other side, for sure, regulation is still part of the challenges, and it can only be solved by having an intensive discussion within several ministries in Indonesia, because this regulation is not only, for example, coming from MOAF, but maybe it's also linked with the Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Investment and so on. So I think it's good to sit together and discuss about it. So what I put as a challenging market is about the domestic market, if you want to target it domestic trading. And then again, legal binding for collaboration, that's something that we have to solve. What kind of legal binding that is eligible to enter the carbon credit scheme in Indonesia, for example. Last but not least, we're talking about validation and verification. Again, if the target here is to enter VCM, which is voluntary carbon market, validation and verification is already provided by several standards like VERA, CCPA, for example, gold standard. But again, we have to think even this validation or verification scheme is met with the regulation of Indonesian government. So maybe some of you already came across with the SRN, System Registrasi Nasional. I think what they have in SRN is for methodology which is not recognized the methodology in VERA and other voluntary standards. So that's some of the challenges that needs to be overcome. And I think if we can work together to overcome these challenges, then this opportunity can be used not only to boost the community development, but it will also contribute to the national economy. So that's my response. How we can make use the result of the accounting in fostering the carbon market in Indonesia.
Thank you, Dr. Arita. It's very real things and very concrete things that involve the community, also in the market itself. And in the reality, it's already done in the case ya. Tadi sudah disebutkan ya, sudah dilakukan di beberapa tempat. Jadi it's not something that is very, it's very far from us ya Bu ya. Mungkin 20 tahun lalu, 30 tahun mungkin ya, kita masih apa ini barang gitu ya. Nah, sekarang kita sudah bisa utilize ini menjadi sesuatu yang konkret gitu ya secara finansial dan ekonomis ke masyarakat. Dan katanya karbon itu the invisible commodity gitu ya. Jadi
Yeah.
kita trading tapi kita yang mana nih barangnya gitu ya, yakin gak yakin ya. Tapi that's why kenapa regulation is really important in that scene. Kita so to trust everyone, the stakeholders to make it happen. Gitu ya kira-kira ya. Makasih Bu Arita. It was very straightforward and comprehensive and very real thing that we can learn, we can see that Indonesia already done it. Ya, ini bukan sesuatu yang terjadi di negara-negara advance saja, tapi dalam skala kecil kita juga sudah melakukannya gitu ya. Baik, ini tepat di 15.15 kita punya 10 menit untuk next session for the discussion ya. Silakan Bapak Ibu, ini menarik karena siapa tahu nanti saya nggak tahu nih singkong ini masuk kan, ini fokus di petland ya. Tapi siapa tahu di rumah ada kebun singkong nanti kan siapa tahu nih bisa ya kan sekalian menikmati singkongnya kita bisa atau malah justru singkong itu membuat emisi karbon. Nah, ini
Yeah,
yang
not necessarily on the peatland sih Pak. So when we're
Oke.
talking about the carbon credit, so any type of ecosystem is possible. I just have a look on the list of the question in the chat asking about agroforestry, for example, that is possible to enter carbon credit, yes. But as Lars mentioned before, that in the accounting system, what we have to do is we need to do the accounting at the extent that's the current situation. But for carbon trading, there's a different requirement despite of the extent. So first extent is a must, but then what we can trade in the carbon trading is only the additionality. So what kind of additionality that we have, and that's the one that we can trade. It's not only the stock. So that's
Oke. Yeah.
that's the additional thing from the accounting.
Yes. Oke, cool. Ya, silakan Bapak Ibu, please participants Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, silakan. Ada pertanyaan ini, ada beberapa pertanyaan di chat. Cuma sebelum kami tampilkan yang di chat, kalau mau open mic silakan. Kita masih punya waktu sampai 15.25. Silakan, ini sayang sekali kalau nggak dieksplor. Oke. Nggak ada, oke. Kalau nggak ada kita pancing. Oh, ada Pak Dudi. Silakan Pak Dudi, open mic langsung.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Darmawan. Should I speak in bahasa or speak in English, Pak?
For sure, up to you, Pak. Superior.
Okay. Barita speak in bahasa aja, Mbak ya. So you can translate to Prof. Lars.
Yes, yes, monggo, monggo.
Oke, well, Pak Darmawan, ya, we've been discussing ya, kita sudah diskusi dengan beberapa kementerian, terus kemudian ada satu hal yang mungkin nanti ada dua terkait dengan policy atau terkait dengan technical nih. Yang pertama adalah kita tahu bahwa mangrove berada di dalam kawasan hutan yang itu juga merupakan ranahnya KLHK. Satu sisi mangrove juga bagian dari marine protected area. Nah, ini bagaimana cost sharing yang mungkin bisa kita didiskusikan apakah ini memang nanti akan menjadi cross cutting isu antar kementerian jika kita akan membahas mengenai carbon trading. Yang kedua mungkin ini adalah sangat teknikal, saya juga tulis di chat gitu. Jadi terkait dengan perdagangan karbon, so Prof. Lars, this is very technical issue and maybe please advise us. Maybe we can discuss later on because we are in the same institution. Is there any specific or minimum requirement ya? How large, how big the minimum area can be claimed for the carbon trading, especially in the mangrove area. Jadi Mbak Rita, punten. Jadi sebenarnya kita juga ingin tahu sebenarnya di dalam requirement IPCC atau international requirement yang bisa dibahas itu adalah berapa minimum area di dalam area mangrove yang bisa diklaim gitu. Itu aja. Terima kasih banyak. Over to you.
Terima
Pak.
kasih Pak Dudi ya. Thank you Pak. Bu Arita, Prof. Lars, wait minutes. We have Bu Fitri. Nah, biar sekalian nanti dijawab ya. Tadi Pak Dudi soal cost sharing dan cross cutting isu policy dan juga tadi secara teknis terkait dengan mangrove. Silakan Bu Fitri.
Ya, selamat sore. Terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan kepada saya untuk bertanya. Jadi yang pertama yang ingin saya tanyakan adalah berkaitan dari penjelasan Profesor Lars tadi, bahwa salah satu opsi untuk wetlands atau peatlands ya, ini tadi adalah sagu. Saya setuju bahwa untuk carbon sequestration di peatland, sagu salah satu alternatif yang memberikan benefit secara ekonomi. Nah, cuma kalau kemudian kita ingin mengkaitkan dengan skema carbon trading, itu kita akan memerlukan jenis tanaman yang itu kiranya dalam kurun waktu periode tertentu yang sepengetahuan saya kurang lebih sekitar 10 tahun lah ya, 20 tahun rata-rata buyer itu atau menginginkan areal itu tidak ada penebangan. Sementara kalau sagu ini kan kita panen batangnya ya. Nah, itu kalau untuk peatland, jenis tanaman apa yang kira-kira bisa disarankan supaya itu bisa ikut skema ke carbon trading. Nah, itu demikian. Terima kasih atas jawabannya Profesor Lars.
Terima kasih Bu Fitri. Ada Pak atau Bu Jenny tadi ya yang raise hand. Mau langsung sekalian tiga nih Prof. Lars ya. We have three question. Ya, Pak atau Bu Jenny ya tadi ya.
Halo, selamat.
Pak Jenny Rarjo, silakan Pak.
Ya, terima kasih ke mungkin pertanyaan saya jadi Peatland Restoration Agency Pak Lans. Next presentation, saya hanya ingin bertanya, kita punya rewetting kanal blocking so many di lahan peatland yang dimiliki oleh community atau individu masyarakat Pak. Insentif apa yang menurut Pak Lans harus diberikan ke mereka kalau mereka tidak berupa komunal gitu ya, tapi individu. Yang kedua, kita juga punya sagu di Rio, kita sudah menanam hampir 300 hektar sejak 5 tahun yang lalu dan oleh community. Kira-kira bagaimana memasuki pasar karbonnya, lembaga apa yang bisa membantu mereka untuk membuat mereka bisa mengakses insentif untuk karbon. Terima kasih.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Jenny ya. Ini langsung konkret, ini nanti bisa langsung dieksekusi nih Pak Jenny ya. Jadi sudah ada sabunya di sana. Oke, Prof. Lats, we have three participant. It's several question. Pak Dudi, kemudian Bu Fitri dan Pak Jenny. Silakan, please Prof. Lats, you will answer first.
Thank you so
Okay,
much
first one.
for the
Yeah,
questions.
please.
Yes, please. So I will
Yeah.
have our first best shot at the questions, and then Arita can maybe provide more comprehensive
Okay,
answer.
okay.
But
The question
I will make a
from
start.
yeah.
So the first question of Dudi was a bit about collaboration between ministries, right? So that question I need to skip because that is not my field. But the second question was on the minimum area for carbon trading. I don't think there is actually something like a limit or an official minimum trading area. It's just that you need to invest in monitoring, reporting, and verification. And if you do that for a very small area, it's going to be very expensive compared to the benefits that you get from such a small area. So I think in general, you would need to have several thousands of hectares at least to make it attractive for investors. So a few thousand hectares, I think, would be good. Now, another option is to say, look, I'm combining individual areas, right? Maybe if it's the same ecosystem, even though maybe they're not adjacent to each other, but if you have maybe village forest in 20 villages and together they're 2,000 or 3,000 hectares, maybe you can also try, because you can set up one monitoring, reporting, verification system for that. I think that's my answer to that question. Then Ibu Fitri, you asked a good question about the SAGO, and thank you for giving me the chance then to elaborate a little bit on that, because I think the SAGO is something, because we've been looking at options to restore, to have good economic use of peatlands for 15 years, but in the end it seems that SAGO really is the best option. And so you said, look, the community has to harvest the sago after 10 years because you harvest the trunk, and you're absolutely right. So the thing that matters is in this case is that you want to compare the baseline. So what matters for a carbon payment scheme, right? You want to compare the baseline with the situation that you will create. And if the baseline is a degraded peat, maybe with the alang-alang there and fire every year, and also oxidation, it means that the baseline is there's a lot of CO2 emissions. Now, if I then restore the peatland, I re-wet it, right, and then I increase the water level, the first benefit, of course, is that the CO2 emissions are really reduced. That's the first benefit. Then the second benefit is that you capture even more CO2 because from alang-alang vegetation, you go to sago plants. And keep with the sago plants, it works like this, right? That you harvest the trunk, but you also allow the trunk to grow, right? So you harvest after 8 or 9 years a trunk, but when you harvest, the same plant has already 4 or 5 different trunks, and you don't harvest all the trunks. You harvest one trunk out of the 5. So that means that the ecosystem that you get, the agro ecosystem, that still has quite a high biomass. Maybe so we're talking about 70 or 80 tons of carbon per hectare, even though you kind of continue harvesting, still it is like almost like a forest ecosystem that you have. So in that sense, you have a lot of carbon benefits from reducing fire, from reducing oxidation, and also from building up biomass, even though you harvest some of that biomass every year. But the point, of course, is, as you also mentioned, I think that you have to wait for 8 or 9 years before the farmers can get to the first harvest, and the farmers cannot wait 8 years to get some money. So that is, I think, why the carbon market is useful, because this is, it's the main criterion for the carbon market is that the investment would not happen without the payment from the carbon market. And in this case, the barrier is that the farmers have to wait such a long time. So if you can use the carbon market to get some money to give to the farmer, or maybe to support them with some intercropping or some crops in the first 8 years, right? And to also support the rebetting process and the planting of the sago, for example. If you can make that happen, means that the money from the carbon market is very well spent, right? It's really complementary, the effect of what you would have in the baseline situation. So you really change the situation. And at the same time, the farmer is supported in the first 8 years. And the nice thing now about sago is that in the long term, the farmer has a big incentive, and that is already going to the question of Mr. Gianni, right? The farmer has a big incentive to sustain the sago palm, because once the sago is mature, he can harvest every year. So he gets an income every year. And the sago, you don't even have to replant. It just keeps on producing for 50 or maybe 100 years. So in that sense, if you overcome the first 8 years, maybe with money from the carbon market, it's a great crop to have, because the farmer can really earn a lot of money. And the nice thing is that, if you plant fruit trees, yeah, at some point people have enough fruit, right? So the market will just go down. But if you have starch, you can export all over the world. You can even make bioplastic of the sagu starch. So the University of Wageningen has done some tests on that with the partners in Indonesia. And yeah, you can get good quality bioplastics from sagu. So it means you have the market is unlimited for that sagu. So I hope that answers your question, Ibu Fitri.
Ya, terima kasih Prof. Large. Ya, Pak Jenny ya, nanti bisa langsung tuh tadi ya, bisa diekspor juga ternyata. Pak Jenny mungkin sih kenalan juga nih dari mana biar partisipan juga tahu ternyata partisipan kita beragam nih. Pak Jenny, Bu Fitri dari mana? Pak Dudi tadi, silakan open mic dari mana Pak Jenny, Bu Fitri?
Saya dari BRG Pak, Mangrove and Peatland
Rekonstruksi.
Restoration Agency.
Oh, oke, dari plan mangrove ya. Bu Fitri dari
Saya dari Project IMPLI di bawah KLHK untuk
Project
restorasi peatland di Sumatera.
Peatland ya. Oke. Baik Pak Dudi, tadi ada Pak Dudi ya. Baik, it's very interesting, tapi selalu waktu yang membatasi ya. We need, I think we need more time or maybe another time we have more discussion and make it a bit more konkret tadi terkait ekspor sagu. Dan saya belajar sagu dari Prof. Mas tadi ternyata kayak pisang ya, potong terus nanti muncul gitu ya. Saya baru tahu ini Bu Arita. Nah ini ternyata malah dari Prof. Las ya belajar sagu. Baik, Bapak Ibu ini karena waktu sudah limit gitu ya, terbatas. I think it's because the time large. We have to finish this discussion, but again, it's not finished yet for the discussion. So we have to finish this webinar, but it is not finished yet for the discussion. And make it concrete tadi Bu Arita bilang ya, make it concrete dan again give back on the community, kontribusi to the contribute to the global emission reduction gitu ya, dan juga forestry as whole for sustainability of Indonesian development ya. Jadi ini satu hal yang sangat penting dan sekali lagi kita terus berkarya dan tidak berhenti untuk berdiskusi dan mencari solusi atas apa-apa yang sudah kita kerjakan dan menjadi tantangan kita kira ke depan ya untuk peatland dan sebagainya. Dan ada World Bank di sini, terima kasih sekali World Bank sudah memberikan kolaborasi antara Kementerian Keuangan, kemudian KLHK dan juga KKP ya. Tadi ada cross cutting isu terkait dengan policy dan mungkin ini menjadi sarana yang sangat penting ya untuk nanti bisa menjadi bridging policy yang cukup komprehensif dan mitigasi beberapa risiko ke depan tadi yang disampaikan Bu Arita. Baik, selanjutnya saya over ke Mbak Royani. Thank you very much all the participants and see you for the next webinar. Keep discussion for better Indonesia futures.
All right, thank you, Mr. Darmawan. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause for our speakers and moderator today. I'm sure we'll have gained a lot of knowledge and understanding from their excellent presentation and discussion. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to inform you that the evaluation link has been sent to the chat room. So please fill in the evaluation and presence room form and write the correct keyword. And the keyword is carbon trading. Please remember the keyword, ladies and gentlemen, because only participants with the correct keyword can get the certificate of this webinar. And we repeat, the keyword is carbon trading. All right, next, before we close this webinar, I would like to invite His Excellency, Mr. David Kachan, the Senior Economist of the World Bank, to deliver his closing statement. To His Excellency, Mr. David Kachan, time is yours.
All good? I'm over here. Okay. Terima kasih Bu Royani. Selamat siang Ibu Bapak sekalian. Saya dan tim kami dari Bank Dunia merasa terhormat membuat webinar ini dengan tim DJKN. Saya ingin menyampaikan terima kasih banyak pada Pak Arik, champion kita untuk penilaian di Indonesia, dan pembicara kita Dr. Lars, Dr. Arita, dan Dr. Darmawan atas presentasi dan diskusi yang menarik sekali. Saya tahun bahwa penilaian karbon dalam hutan penting sekali pada pemerintah di Indonesia. Penilaian ini bisa membantu pasar karbon yang aktif dan profitable. Waktu sama, lahan gambut manajemen juga penting sekali untuk pemerintah yang punya tujuan 2,7 juta hektares untuk restorasi. Ini tujuan adalah paling besar di dunia. Saya harap seminar ini tidak hanya menunjukkan penilaian yang baik, namun bagaimana penilaian dapat memberikan masukan pada kebijakan dan proyek. Menurut saya, ini hal paling penting. Akhirnya, saya ingin menyampaikan terima kasih pada Anda semua atas kerjasama. Kita akan bertemu lagi di webinar berikutnya. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you, Mr. David Kashan, for the closing statement. Ladies and gentlemen, we kindly remind you to fill in the evaluation and presence form and write the correct keyword. And the keyword is carbon trading. To repeat, the keyword is carbon trading. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this enlightening international webinar. We hope that you all have enjoyed the presentations and discussions of our distinguished speakers. So, for all of the participants who still want to know more about valuation, especially the valuation of natural resources, don't worry, be happy, because this webinar is not the only event of the Valuation School 2.0 series. We will have some other activities like workshops on the upcoming events. So please look forward to our next events and stay tuned for the information on our Instagram at Direktorat Penilaian DJKN. Before we say goodbye, we would like to thank all the audiences for your cooperation and participation in this event. We hope this webinar has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to learn more about valuation. Pergi bersama ke tepi muara. Di tepinya ada putri malu. Sampai kita di penghujung acara, terima kasih dan semoga sehat selalu. Thank you, good afternoon, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam.
Waalaikumsalam.
After taking off from Soekarno-Hatta Airport, the evaluation team flew to Bliming-Sari Banyuwangi Airport. Once they landed in Banyuwangi, they quickly coordinated with the North Banyuwangi KPH. The Director of Assessment coordinated with the head of the North Banyuwangi KPH by going out to the field personally. Follow along if you're interested in learning more about the work of the assessment team. Once the assessment team had finished coordinating, they jumped right into fieldwork. On day 1, the evaluation group visited BKPH Bangsring to prepare planting areas for teak trees. The evaluation group also learned here about PCP, or spacing trial plots. After the plots were made, the evaluation team visited the falling sites to learn more about the felling process, the chain of custody, and the transportation of the teak wood. The assessment team looked at pine plots and other types of wood on the second day. In this case, the assessment group looked at the possibilities surrounding the extraction of pine resin as a non-timber forest product in the North Banyuwangi KPH. The evaluation group could also carve out tapping channels, koken, for the sap to collect in. The assessment team continued their tour by going to where the tapped sap is stored before being transported to the processing facility. The assessment team surveyed the groundwater and surface water users in the forest on the third day. Several people from different communities near the forest are being surveyed using questionnaires. The assessment crew inspected the log stacks the next day. There are 3 TPKs at the KPH in the northern part of Banyuwangi. This time around, the assessment team visited the Bajulmati TPK, the biggest of all the TPKs. Ganesh, an expert in determining where high-quality teak wood falls on a scale from primary to fifth, joined the assessment team for this TPK. Furthermore, the chain of custody from the logging locations we have visited is examined in the Book of ISA. In this section, the head of TPK Bajulmati also describes how the timber gets from the logging site to the individual wooden lot plots that the buyer or timber auction winner can take. There are tourist attractions in KPH Banyuwangi as well. The trip, however, is a religious one, as the object in question is a pedalazon that a religious store has paid a visit to.